these nights particularly is that as leaders, that we would grow as kingdom leaders, that we would be spirit empowered. Exactly what you talked about, like touch and counseling. You need heavenly wisdom. You need spiritual healing. Like that's what differentiates us from the next person, is that the words are empowered by the Holy Spirit. Where we go is empowered. Our connections are empowered. The Lord literally makes room for our giftings. And it says, and he presents us before kings as our gifts make room for us. And I shared on Sunday this idea of our talents can bring us places where sometimes our character can't keep us. And I pray as leaders that we can like egg each other on with integrity and biblical values. So that's really our vision for these nights. Kingdom-centered, spirit-led, community. Like, we do this collectively. I don't think you can't lead without, like, Brandon, come with me, right? Like, if he was like, no. I'm like, I'm leading myself. So, and then this idea of fruitfulness. So I think one of the beautiful things about community is, like, Ruth's win is my win. And this is something I've learned that's been, like, it's kind of hard, but when you're going through trial, doing it in community so that when the Lord lifts you up, those same people are like, your victory is my victory. And journeying with people instead of just going, hey, check me out on my highlight reel. Because it's part of the story, but it's hardly any of it, right? It's the people. We know when that Olympian gets on the medal or the podium, we know the struggle and the sacrifice, and we go, I celebrate you for all that you've done to get there, instead of like, oh my gosh, she just like showed up and won the race. Like, that's not. So that's what we're here for, is to kind of dig ditches together, so that our victories, like, it's for the kingdom. It's as a community. When we think about leadership and vision particularly, leading is all about setting a vision that's worth people following. Is it not?
Yeah.
Hey, so there's just a couple definitions here we'll review, but it's a process of using your God-given capacity of influence in a specific group towards his purpose. It's the ability to influence other people. So it's basically using the tools that God has put in your tool belt to build something that's pretty great and worth following at the end of the day. We're all called to lead different things. We're called to have a vision towards different things. And so what we feel for these last couple months has been, we need to be able to lead ourselves first. And so in September, we talked about a leadership plan. How do we grow and just access resources around leadership? Last month, we talked about rules of life. So what spiritual disciplines can we have in place to grow as leaders? And then today is this vision statement. And
like, you guys, we have all the resources from our first 2 nights of the QR code.
Yes.
So if you scan the leadership resource code, all of so everything she's talking about now, and video.
Yes. And what I'd love to do is I have PDFs too, obviously you can get it on the QR code. But if you leave your name and number, I can say I got 20 numbers tonight. No. What I like to do is I put the group on a broadcast. We're not grouped together, but I can send like one text and it'll go to all of you. And it'll just say, hey, leadership night coming up next week. Here's the materials from last week. It just helps instead of having to look at some stuff. So if you're interested and okay with me sending you a text about leadership, please add your information here. Okay, so now we're going to start on leading yourself. What does Jeremiah 29:11 say?
Before I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil.
Can anyone recite it without looking? Let's do it together. For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to and not to. Okay. Go on. First of all. No, just kidding.
15, anybody? 15.
Lest the wicked take over.
No context.
No context. Okay. Admittedly, how many people this week have questioned whether God's plan for you is good? Yeah. And full of hope. So it's interesting, right? Like we believe in the Bible. It's true. It's the good book. It's all this stuff. And yet sometimes we deviate from this core understanding that like he wants good for you. He wants to prosper you. So if you're in a spot, we heard this weekend, that it doesn't look like that, it's not your final destination. Hallelujah. But the process is very good for us. It's just very painful. So when we look at the heroes, Moses, David, Paul, all sorts of leaders, can you explain a little bit, like how were they called? Did they have anything about their particular, like how God talked to them or what happened with their lives that's interesting?
For Moses, what happened with him is that he was the king, sort of like a king in Egypt, ruling over the Israelites and everything. And then all of a sudden, he went to meet up with Baca and noticed that Joshua was about to be whipped by him, and killed Baca and ended up being exiled and went up to the mountain, got the call to go and free the Israelites out of Egypt.
So do you think it's surprise? Like, that's a great overview. So he clearly reads the context, right, outside the verse, which is good. Do you think he went up to the mount to do you think he knew that as he was climbing that day that the Lord was going to call him?
I think that most, Moses, David, Gideon, a lot of people get picked from obscure places. They're just doing their day-to-day stuff, and then they encounter God. Funnily enough, one of the people that comes to mind that did was Samson. He was they were from birth, you're set apart. And then he really messed up.
Yes.
So, but yeah, God picks a lot of the successful ones seem to be from obscure places.
Yeah. And what I find encouraging for all of us in that is if you came tonight, you're like, I have no idea where I'm even going to go with this. Think about where Saul went. Does anyone know what Saul was doing when he was called?
No.
What?
No.
Saul, before he was called. His father sent him out to do something.
Find donkeys.
Yeah. He lost donkeys. Imagine 3 days. Hey, Dad, can't find your donkey. So his father Kish sent him out to find donkeys.
She didn't say king Saul, she said separate.
Did you say chopping heads off?
It's in the Bible.
Wrong Saul. Okay, I get it. Okay, fine, fair.
You didn't say
fair.
King Saul.
My bad. Okay. I should have given you a book. 1 Samuel 9. This is one of my favorites, where it says, Kish lost his donkeys. He sends out Saul to look for the donkeys. Could you imagine, we lose our keys, we lose our phone for a hot second, and we're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Imagine in that state, some prophet just coming along and being like, hey, you're anointed over Israel. You know what? Because I've heard the cry of the Philistines, and your calling is to protect Israel from the Philistines. So I just take encouragement. Even David, right? He's just shepherding. He's not in the right place at the right time. God still knows where he's at and calls him. So the Lord calls people to himself, as opposed to us having to, seek. I think in time he reveals what our calling is through our capabilities. But you can be encouraged today that if you feel absolutely lost, looking for donkeys, or maybe you don't even know what you're looking for, God can still meet you, and he will meet you. We see this over and over and over again. And you know what's even more encouraging? We'll probably have the same responses as Moses and these others. Moses is like, pardon me, send somebody else. And then Saul's like, I want to hide in the baggage. Who am I? Gideon's like, I'm but a Benjamite. They're all, and I think that's so human of us. Rarely are we like David and being like, who am I that you brought me thus far, Lord? Most of us are actually a little bit more send someone with me. I want to bring a friend to the retreat. I'm afraid I'm going alone. And so what's really interesting, though, is each of these people, or Paul, went from being a guy against Christianity, chopping people's heads off, to having a calling over being an advocate. So what's common is that it came from the Lord first. The vision's bigger than their personal dreams. So David king over Israel, his calling was to build a generation that would then build the temple, whereas Saul was to protect Israel from the Philistines. Moses was very clear to protect Israel from Egypt. And so when we actually drill down to everyone's calling, it's very actually quite specific when we get past the general will of God, which I think is encouraging for each of you, that you are not left without this imprint of the Lord having a design for you. And then obviously the need for faith and obedience. Most of these characters, the first time they were called, they were absolutely afraid. And then I think with God's encouragement and him not going anywhere, we're like, okay, let's do this afraid, right? So now I want you to think about how these stories relate to your own journey. How can you trust God's plan and embrace a vision that fits into the bigger story for your life? I'd love to hear from one person. When you think about Moses, David, Saul, Mary, Jesus, like, what encourages you about the way that the Lord called them to himself, as opposed to it beginning with our own ambitions in mind? Something that encourages you.
I think what encourages me and the theme from all of these is just to see how unequipped they all were for what they were being called to, and how I think most of them knew that, and yet we have the privilege of seeing the provision of God through their stories.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's why sometimes it's a good place to start, like, what is in my hand? As the Lord said to Moses, like, what's in your hand? And so that's where we're going to start, actually, in asking and reflecting ourselves. In section 1, what I'm going to do now is go through 3 sections, and they relate to this worksheet. So I'll go through each section, and then I'm going to give time for you to jot some notes on your worksheet, and we're just going to talk it through. So the first, reflection on God's given gifts and talent. So, does anyone know who Bezalel was?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, tell me.
He was the guy who did so much of, like, the craftsmanship for the temple.
Yes.
Well, the tabernacle.
Yes.
He got gifted by God, especially. He could work with bronze, all sorts of things like that. And God specially gifted him with that.
Yeah, and it was this gift of, like, architecture, design. Like, can anyone here draw faces? Yeah? Like, that's a special skill. Like, I don't have that skill. I draw stickmen. So it's interesting how, they were given this very specific skill for a very specific calling to build the temple. How about Joseph and Esther? It's in the sentence, but what was something that Joseph could do that ultimately brought him that God used to bring him from the prison to the palace?
Interpret dreams.
Like, how many of us are going around, my gifting is an interpretation of dreams? You might know that you can perceive, you have discernment, but so often we're sort of a little bit blind to how mighty God can leverage these gifts that he's deposited. But and Esther's beauty actually brought her to a place where she could then defend her own people. Like, we don't think of these. I just don't think I haven't ever met someone who's like, my top gifting is interpreting dreams. I don't think Joseph did that either. I just think it's something that God used to his favor. And so what I'd like us to do now is to reflect on your own God-given talents. How might you use them for a bigger purpose? I'd like you to turn to your worksheet. It says section 1, reflection on God-given gifts and talents. List your God-given spiritual gifts or natural talents. What has been affirmed by others? So consider, what do people often say about you? So I had this interview this week. I didn't get the job. I didn't update anyone, so I asked for feedback. And of course, they always sandwich the feedback, right? So they say these 3 great things, which you're probably used to hearing. They could be like, you are so relational, you're so wise as you counsel people. So what are those areas where people are often commenting about who you are, what you can do? I'd like you to write those things down on your worksheet. How have you been able to make an impact beyond your natural abilities as well, using those giftings? I'm going to read through actually both of them and then turn on a bit of music and give you about 5 minutes to fill that out. The second is, how have you used your gifts? So consider instances where you've used these gifts and talents, reflect on the impact they've had on others and the fulfillment they've experienced. Think of destiny moments or times you felt fully alive. If someone would like to give an example to help everyone else, that would also be really useful.
I can go.
Sure.
For the first one,
Yeah,
do you want me to give you just one example or multiple?
just give an example.
People have commented that I'm very pastoral.
Thank you. How about you, Lori?
Wise and empathetic.
Love it. How about you? Brave. I love that. How have you used those talents now to make an impact? How is it used at work? How is it used in your family, in your church? So I'm going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes to actually fill that out. So that first section is to sort of ground you in, okay, you're doing something in my life, Lord. Like, something's evident. Let's look into that a little bit more. So what if has anyone heard of Strength Finders? A couple people. The guys of Strength Finders is like, hey, you've got your natural talents, but if you were to multiply, say you're really good at something. So say you're really good at singing. Say that's a 5 on 5. Like, she can sing. Girl can sing. If she puts 5 and 5, say she has passion for it as well, that'll likely make her have just put a lot more effort into learning everything around it. So you multiply her 5 skill by her 5 effort, you're gonna get 25. Now, if Gabe can't sing, he can't, but say his skill is 1 on 5, no matter how hard he tries, people don't want him on the worship team, like he's not delivering people with his worship. It's a sad face. Right? So his effort, like,
Don't get her negative words in these are mixed up.
so he's like, I'm not gonna put so much effort in, I'm not even skilled in this anyway. So you multiply his 1 skill by like 3 effort. You get 3. There's a big difference between operating in your calling and passion to trying to put all your effort into something that you're actually not quite designed for. Not that you can't grow in it, but I think that's really important to like lean into your strengths, get increasingly trained. It's something that the Lord has given you, right? We get career coaching, we get this. Well then, if I felt led for singing, it would look like voice lessons and music and surrounding yourself with Maverick City trainers.
I was like just enjoying that.
All those people. Like, so what's interesting is knowing that too, right?
What was that called?
Strength Finders. It's called Strength Finders 2.0. And it's actually a test that you can take, and it'll separate your core strengths into 4 categories: relational, influence, execution, and like analytical, I think. So most people would have one category that's stronger. Some you might have 1 in each. Like I'm 2 in influence, 1 relational, 1 in, maybe it's learning or like head stuff, and then 1 in execution. So you like, but I think it's an interesting test to kind of go through and goes through your core strengths. And one of your strengths could be positivity. Another one, like someone like Karis, one of the giftings would be woo, right? She just has that pizzazz that you're like, who is this girl? I want to be her friend, right? Not all of us have that. I want it on my list. I don't have it. But when I took this, I was like, I want woo! And it's like, you can be positive.
If you pay more money to get different answers, if you pay $5.99 for the next 6 months,
Fake it.
Tyson, you just need more patterns to get.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
and fun classes.
I told Karis, I was like, I want a Karis themed party where I can wear all my patterns on top of each other. It'd be like floral plus checkered plus like chevron plus fake glasses and her earrings. I'm with you. I'm with you. I have LASIK. I don't need glasses.
Fake earrings. Get a clip-on.
No. Okay. So section 2 on this. So there's things that you absolutely love. And even if you're not good at those things and you have a passion for it, I think the Lord can carry that too. Like, I don't think Moses was like, I'm so passionate about leading people out of the desert. But the Lord led him and gave him leadership skill. And you look at someone like Daniel, passion was to just serve the Lord wholeheartedly, and it resulted in the fact that he was an extremely excellent human, disciplined, principled, prayerful, purposeful. And so I'd like you to spend some time now thinking about what are these activities, causes, issues that ignite a sense of passion within you? Topics or pursuits that make your heart beat faster? Which biblical stories, passages, or characters do you resonate with and why? So for me, my pastor and I used to not argue about this, but he's like, I like Peter because Peter's like so human. And I'm like, I like Daniel because he's so excellent. And my pastor would be like, I can't relate to Daniel. I'm like, I want to be more like Daniel. So it just showed this difference of like, there's something in me that desires spirit of excellence. And I like Daniel because he's a man of integrity. He does what he says he's going to do. He's prayerful, like in every way that he could honor the Lord without, or he honored authority in every way that he could until it would mean that he wasn't honoring the Lord. So there's something about him that I aspire to as a leader, that he put his money where his mouth is, he was willing to do the hard things, and that's what I find I'm really attracted to in character and in people, is like, are they willing to lead a group at their own sacrifice? Are they willing to take chances even though, so that's someone because of the calling for leadership over my life, I look at someone like Daniel. But the next person might look at a Deborah. You're more of like a prophetess, you have words of encouragement, you call things out in people, you call them into their destiny. So consider the characters even that you're drawn to in the scriptures, your passions, the activities, that's the first question. Second is moments of joy. When do you feel totally excited? I had a board meeting this week, and the icebreaker question's like, when do you feel like the most coolest ever? And in other words, this person used other words. And Jeremy, what was your answer, Jeremy?
When I can walk down the street and get gang members to move for. Yeah.
Yeah. So already
I misunderstood the question because everybody else went in a totally different direction.
No, but it made you feel like this power, like there's an authority that he has in the inner city that I don't have. So that's the second question. Like, what are these moments of joy where you're like, oh, I feel alive when I'm hosting, when I'm giving wise counsel, what are those things, or when I'm with youth? And then the third is consider the needs around you. So where do you find yourself going, I can be of service here? No one's asking, you just sort of insert yourself in those places because you know something you're passionate about, something you like to do. It doesn't feel like homework, it doesn't feel like extra work. It's just, like for me, like these nights don't at all feel like homework to me. It's an area of passion. So those are the three questions that I'm going to give you a bit of time to go through on that. So now what we're going to do is enter section 3. And you'll have to do most of this actually at home, but what I want to do is just provide some examples, because this tends to help. If we look at Proverbs 29:18, tells us that where there's no vision, people kind of wander, in layman terms, right? If there's no vision, I was in Eastern Europe recently, and there's this guy called Tito. He was a kind of a communist dictator there, but he was good for the country. He had a super vision over the country and how youth could be mobilized. And during his reign, they built so many railroads and buildings because he had a vision for the youth. He wasn't a perfect character, but his vision carried this country. It's incredible how much was built. Now there's major consequences because he didn't consider the price tag, but it's interesting how vision can direct people. And we follow people of vision. It might not even be the right vision. You see influencers, people are like, oh, I'm all like, people have a vision and people will come alongside you if your vision is strong enough, compelling enough. Unfortunately, we need to really discern where these people are going, what their motivations are. As Christians, though, when we believe in our leaders and we trust them and they have integrity, it's like, I will run with you. I will support this as much as possible because I trust the vision is running after Jesus and it's to glorify him. And at the end of the day, I think that's where most of our vision ends up, but how we get there is a bit different based on our callings and our passions and our giftings. So Paul, like his gifting was is in speech, essentially, in understanding how to articulate with different groups, and so he was called to share the gospel in different areas. And he used his giftings, talents, passion, authority. Like he had some serious clout on all sides of the fence. Before and after he beheaded people. So what I'd like to do now is actually I'm going to ask these 5 questions. So I share these questions because there's some guides to get to your vision statement. I'm going to go through some examples. But these questions are more, as you consider like next year, or maybe you just want a direction in a certain area of your life. This is called the Play to Win framework. So I do strategy and corporate planning as my profession. And so I work with executives and we need to figure out where they want to go. And so I ask them these 5 questions. And it's this Play to Win framework. Feel free to look it up. I didn't create it, but I just help facilitate. The questions are, 1, what's your winning aspiration? These aren't on any of your sheets, so you have to write them down if you're sick. What's your winning aspiration? Number 2, where will you play? Where will you play? Number 3, how will you win? How will you win? Number 4, what capabilities must be in place? And number 5, what systems, you could also like bracket management systems, are required? So these 5 questions under this Play to Win framework, the idea is that we shouldn't just be living our lives so-so. Like, we should be wanting to win souls, be the best at what we do, honor the Lord fully. We're not here just to have a mediocre life. I don't think that's what the Lord designed for us. It might feel mediocre just because he has us in certain places. But the idea is, let's live our life, our year, to win at whatever the Lord has called us to do. So when I asked these questions last year, I said, Lord, like, what's my winning aspiration for this year? And he goes, I want you to be able to celebrate people and family well. I said, well, how am I going to do that? 1, through hospitality. 2, through leadership. 3, through accepting social impact. I do a lot of stuff in socialization impact work. Those are the 3 areas where I want you to play. Like, well, how am I going to win? And we go on, and it's like, and that really guided me this year, because it also guides you what you're going to say no to. If Gabe has selected, he is a criminal defense lawyer, it means that he is not a personal injury lawyer. He could do both, but he's not, right? So, like, you choose your instrument often as a musician too. Like, you're either the conductor or you're the artist. Like, you either play basketball or you're the gymnast. Like, so my friend, I joked with her, I said, okay, what's your winning aspiration? She says, I want to be an Olympian. Okay, where are you going to play? Monobob and bobsled. Okay, how are you going to win? She's like, I need to be like the fittest ever. I need to eat clean and I need to have mental clarity when I perform. Okay, what capabilities do you need? She's like, I need extreme physical strength, which means that she has to up her workouts. She's like, totally ripped. She's like, I need health supports. And like, okay, fine. What's your management system? She's like, I actually need sponsorship because we don't have enough money coming in for Canadian athletes. So she needs sponsors. She needs logistics to move her bobsled from one place to another. And so this is like a strategy on a page. It kind of helps guide your general overview. She's not competing in basketball, she's competing in bobsled, so her questions are different. If I was to apply this to Jesus, and I just do this because it's a little bit sometimes more logical to think through these questions than to go, I have a lovely vision statement. So if Jesus did this, what do you think Jesus' winning aspiration was? To save the world, to reconcile people to himself, plain and simple. How will he win? Or where will he play? The world. Everywhere. In our hearts, to the brokenhearted, the outcast. Like, how will he win? He had to die, so sacrificial love.
By choosing people to teach and walk alongside. That too, I think.
Yes, I'll say that in the next one.
Offering forgiveness.
Offering forgiveness. How did he teach?
In parables.
In parable. Like, it's a particular style, right? So he taught through parables, miracles, sacrificial love. He focused on transforming hearts. What capabilities did he need?
Leadership.
Leadership, compassion, empathy, patience. What did you say? Patience. Yeah. And what management systems? He didn't have a formal management system, but obviously the disciples were one of his core. Yeah. So now we're gonna read. So when you're all sharing some of your things, you can say, "Oh, I like playing with this." Not playing. Where to play? I play in this particular group, the youth, or my capability is the ability to connect people. My support system is the church's worship team. So it answered some of these questions even as you were sharing. So now as we read through some of these sample vision statements, you'll be able to see how a lot of them will answer some of those questions. So if we look at, let's go to, if you go here, sample vision statements. Actually, just hide it. Who is this? Okay. I am the unlikely warrior chosen by God. My vision is to deliver Israel from oppression, demonstrating that strength arises from obedience and trust in the Almighty. Through unconventional means and reliance on divine guidance, I aim to bring victory and freedom to my people. It could be a couple people. It could also be Joshua, you're right. Who was the warrior of the tribe of Benjamin? Who was like, I don't know, Lord. I'm going to test you and leave a fleece. Gideon. Okay. So if we see here, he's a warrior chosen. Okay, so that's like kind of his winning aspiration, that he is a warrior for Christ. His vision was to deliver Israel from oppression. Sorry, that was his winning aspiration, is deliver Israel from oppression. What kind of competencies did he need? Demonstrating that strength arises from obedience. He said reliance on divine guidance, unconventional means. If you look at, for example, C.S. Lewis, he was an author. Some of you may have read his books. His vision is to illuminate the beauty and rationality of the Christian faith, inspired by the pursuit of truth and a vibrant imagination. Where does he play? He aims to engage hearts and minds through literature. So his craft was writing. It wasn't preaching, necessarily. His vision is to bridge the gap between reason and faith, inviting individuals into profound exploration of Christian worldview, fostering a culture of intellectual curiosity and spiritual discovery. So you'll be able to kind of read through these on your own, but they're just examples. Daunavan, would you like to just read yours? Because I added that in here.
So good. Yes. I will not die, but I will live and proclaim what God has done. Psalm 118:17. I am called to proclaim the love of the Father, relationship with Jesus, and the power of the Holy Spirit through preaching, worship, leading, and relational discipleship. As I operate in my spiritual gifts, I am a catalyst for corporate unity and individuals becoming fully alive in Christ. I develop and multiply leaders who are relational, kingdom-minded, spirit-led, whole, and fruitful wherever I go, as I live out these values and commit myself to serving local churches, ministries, and the purposes of God.
It's amazing.
So good.
So what is his winning aspiration? Absolutely. How is he going to win?
Through preaching and worship leading and relational discipleship.
Yeah, that's the kind of where he's going to play is similar. Or where he's going to play, he also, I think he's local. If you think about Travis, his where to play is more global. Donovan's is like local, let's transform Edmonton. Capabilities is like relational, kingdom-minded, spirit-led. So those 5 questions just kind of help. Either if you have your own business or kind of think about your year ahead, those are good questions, but they also really apply. Questions are limited though, obviously. Don't follow that framework. It's just as a guide. I'll read mine. I didn't have those questions in mind, but it's more of a novella. But I'm a daughter of the Most High, and before I was born, the Lord set me apart to point me out to the nations. This is Jeremiah 1. Let me before I read it. I used to live in Asia for about 10 years, and one year, my first year in, someone from the church said, I'm doing these videos of expo workers. I went to work at the World Expo, have stayed in the city. And he didn't tell me what questions he was going to ask. So I'm on film. Oh, where are you from? How's your time been here? What's your calling? And I was like, I feel feel called to help facilitate leading people at work and bring them to Christ. Like, I didn't have a good answer. And I went home and I was like, Lord, I want to be able to answer that question. Like, the next person, she knew. She's like, I'm this and this. And I was like, oh. And so I asked the Lord, like, what is it that you called me? What's special? And did spend that time kind of going through the remaining questions. And he led me to this Jeremiah 1. And so I often go back here when I get invitations to speak or to, because of my research or other things, there's been a lot of open doors for me to travel. So that I know it's an anointing, like I know it's space. I've been to almost 70 countries. So this is beyond my natural ability to be able to travel that much. And in Jeremiah it says, do not say you're only a child. Today I have appointed you over nations and kingdoms to uproot, tear down, destroy, and overthrow. And it says that he will touch my lips. So when I travel, I know that there's an anointing to pray over the lands where he sends me. And that when I'm there, he may give me a word to share, whether it's to the pastors there or to businesses or whatever. But I expect some sort of divine intervention because of that Jeremiah 1. So I hold that tightly. So that's where this is coming from. So under his instruction, I'm a daughter of the Most High, and before I was born, the Lord set me apart and appointed me to the nations. Under his instruction to go to everyone he sends me to and say whatever he commands me to say. So something about words there. The Lord has reached out his hand and touched my mouth to encourage others, lead people into kingdom purposes, and to uproot and tear down, destroy, and overthrow the things that are not of the Lord, and to build and plant the kingdom seeds wherever he sends me. I believe God will bring me to each country in my lifetime, promising that wherever I set foot, the land can be gained for kingdom purposes. I'm gifted with a strategic mind and a discipline of being a ready scribe for Christ. And I'm called to business as missions, to glorify Christ through a life of embodying biblical leadership, hospitality, integrity, and compelling communication. So that's, I don't know, it's just like, oh, it's hard to summarize yourself in a paragraph, but there's power in it. So we've got just like 2 minutes left. Yes.
I just want to make a comment. So my vision statement took me 8 months.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And it was like, so I wrote the initial one, and then I submitted it to close friends, they gave me feedback, and then I submitted it to like a helper. He gave me, so don't feel like comparing yourself to that or to Taisa.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely a work in God.
Yeah. Absolutely. Totally. Yeah, and at the end here, so I'll just go through this section here. This is just, suppose your homework. I call it spiritual homework. Anytime someone gives you an encouragement or prophetic word that settles in your spirit after you've tested it, have a secret place for it. I have a Google Docs. And that's how this can be crafted more easily. It's because these words repeat, you review them, test them. And there's a lot of commonality. So add this to your spiritual homework. So define purpose. What do you feel like you're called to do as a leader? What do you feel like God has called you to accomplish? So for me, it's like something about the nation setting foot and just planting pegs. Like I often take tent pegs with me after they've been prayed over, and I bring it to high places. So if I'm climbing a mountain, if I'm next to Netanyahu's house, it's just a funny thing. I don't know what it means or if there's any impact, but I have to trust in faith that like he sent me those places even just to declare and like sent those tent pegs into the places where he sends me. How can you integrate your God-given gifts and talents? Envision the impact that you have. And then there's this beautiful little paragraph. It also says, have lots of grace for yourself. Just like Daunavan said, this is a work in progress. And I think what's really easy to do with the people that we've shared their vision statements, like a lot of these people have passed, well, all of them, except for Daunavan, in those samples. It's easy to look backwards and go, this is what their life was about. Ours is in progress. So this is a marker in time. It can adjust, but I think your core strengths and capabilities, he's just going to continue to grow. So it's good to have a vision statement knowing that it will adapt and form and mature. And then as Daunavan said, he actually shared his. And you know, it's empowering. The more you share, the more people can go, that's right. Or if they're out of line, then you could be like, hey, this is not in line with what we know the Lord has called you to. This is off. Like, is it because you're comparing yourself to this person or that? like stay the course, right? So really encourage you to spend time before the end of the year to do this, and even ask those 5 questions for, like, what does your head look like? So I was talking to Jeremy earlier, and I asked him these 5 questions just to see what his first response would be. So I just want to end with that example, and then I'm going to ask you each, you can think of a checkout word, so something that you're going to take away from tonight, or an encouragement that you felt from this evening. So I asked Jeremy, like for next year, what's your winning, not even next year, but what's your winning aspiration?
Become mayor of the city.
Become mayor of the city. So where are you going to play?
Edmonton.
Edmonton. What level of government is that?
Kind of provincial, but more like city.
Yeah, so it's not federal. Like there's boundaries where to play. How are you going to win?
I'm going to hire the right people around me, and I'm going to let my attributes in the community speak for itself.
What competencies or capabilities do you need?
I need to be a strong leader. I need to be confident. I need to be able to speak in front of people, and I need to hear the people and serve the people.
And then what management systems might you need to support you?
A good manager, someone that can help me manage my time, but also campaign.
Yeah. So next year, when Jeremy has an opportunity to speak and he goes, I don't feel like it, I'll be like, hey, remember that vision the Lord gave you about being mayor? Part of that capability is you being able to speak. So this is really in line. I think you should say yes. Do it afraid. And that's what I desire for all of us, is that we can call each other out. There's fears that we all have, like Moses, and all of them. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't speak. And yet, our friends need to be like, just go for the interview. Yeah. Just host those people. All that. Okay. So with that, just want to thank you for joining tonight. I hope that this was useful for you. We are going to start, this is our last of the year, so you've got lots of days, at least 30 some, to craft this vision statement.
Yes.
Like, I promise you it will transform, even if you just do something for next year. Where are you going to play? And it'll help guide your decisions, and it's been so fruitful for, I think, a lot of us having one, revisiting it. And so I hope that you found this useful tonight.